ready to start the video, but I'm kind of hungry. Maybe I should have a little snack. Sure, there's nothing unusual about this pie. Okay, I want to get a decent bite. Come on. It tastes kind of funny. This is my first time making a YouTube video, everybody. But hi, I'm Lily. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today we are going to be talking about Titus Andronicus, and that intro was just kind of a little, I guess, inside joke if you've read the play. We're going to be covering this as part of my midterm for Shakespeare's plays. This is my first time ever making a YouTube video. I'm very excited. I've been watching YouTube my entire life, and I hope this goes well. please like the video. But before I officially get started, I kind of wanted to show you my fit. I don't know if you can really see. I don't know. It's also another play on words because I'm like the goth queen. That's one of the characters in Titus Andronicus. And he didn't actually mean goth as in emo, but that's how I'm taking it. I think that's a more fun way to look at it. I didn't want to dress up as Tamora and buy, like, I don't know, Elizabethan clothing, like Roman clothing. I don't have the funds for that right now. I'm in community college, okay? Give a girl a break. But I do have a little crown, and I do have a lot of emo clothes, so I'm the goth queen, man. You gotta like the video. I put on black lipstick for this, please. As I've kind of explained, this is part of my midterm for my Shakespeare class, and we're going to be covering Titus Andronicus today. But we're not going to be really covering the plot of Titus Andronicus, so I'd recommend watching another video that explains the plot better if you haven't read it, before you hear me kind of analyze it. Or you can read it yourself for free on the Folger Shakespeare Library website, which is what I did. My professor said she doesn't want anyone to summarize the text in their midterm, so that's the main reason why I won't be covering it. Throughout history, scholars and historians have argued over whether Shakespeare actually wrote the plays published under his name. Novelist Virginia Woolf believes whoever did write these infamous plays was certainly not a woman. According to Woolf, it would have been impossible, completely and entirely, for any woman to have written the plays of Shakespeare in the age of Shakespeare. In her 1929 essay, A Room of One's Own, Woolf gives Shakespeare a hypothetical sister named Judith. And in this hypothetical, Judith is as bright as William, and she is just as passionate of a writer and an actor. But while William is sent to grammar school, Judith must stay home to cook and clean. She can't read more than a few pages of one of her brother's books before being scolded by her parents. Opportunity is a privilege, and Shakespeare clearly had both. Shakespeare had the opportunity to go to London, become a successful actor, and access the Queen's palace, while Judith, being born a woman, is not provided with the same opportunity. Judith must marry a man she does not love to please her father, and when she runs away to escape this loveless marriage, she doesn't find any success in London's theater scene because of her gender. Without any way to express herself creatively, Judith is in such emotional distress that it drives her to take her own life. Virginia Woolf was an English writer and novelist born in 1882 in London, England. Woolf is primarily known for her novels, including, but not limited to, Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse. Woolf has also written impactful essays on women's writing and the politics of power. Today, we will be focusing on her famous essay, A Room of One's Own. A year before the essay was published, Woolf gave lectures at the first two colleges for women at the University of Cambridge. I don't know what just fell. Don't worry about it. At Newham College and Girton College. These lectures inspired Woolf to write A Room of One's Own, and today the essay is considered to be a fundamental work of feminist literature. Essentially, Virginia Woolf walked so Margaret Atwood could run. Woolf believes that in order for a woman to write, she must be well off financially, and she must have a room of her own, hence the title of the essay. In Woolf's eyes, women have been stunted creatively because of the financial and educational disadvantages they have to overcome. In order to be intellectually free, one must be financially free. When comparing A Room of One's Own to the female characters in Titus Andronicus by William Shakespeare, I find Woolf's argument to be pretty solid. Lavinia does not have agency, and when Tamora is given the slightest bit of agency, this makes her a villain. Both women are considered less valuable once they no longer have their virtue. I believe both women have the same intellectual capacity, but Tamora's intelligence is portrayed as manipulation, while Lavinia is perceived as nothing more than a man's property. Lavinia is considered the ideal woman for 15th century England, while Tamora is demonized for using her autonomy to take revenge. And I'm not saying I agree with everything she does, okay? I'm gonna get to that later. I'm not, defending Tamora entirely. I'm just saying she needs agency. That's the main thing. Women need agency. 2 side notes to get to before I, fully dive into my analysis. And the first one's not as important as the second one. So I really don't like a lot of the men in this play. I feel like the only good ones are Marcus and the Luciuses, the big one and the little one. And I would characterize most of the men as either violent, lustful, or stupid. That is a generalization, of course, and it isn't necessarily true 100% of the time, but like I said, I don't really like any of the men in this play, so I won't be analyzing their characters as frequently. I just wanted to throw my opinion out there. My second side note is a bit more of an apology. So I'd like to apologize for not covering Aaron the Moor more extensively in this video. He is an important character, especially to Tamora, who I talk about a lot. But Aaron is oppressed because of his race, so analyzing his character would require the use of critical race theory, and I only want to focus on one theory to analyze Titus Andronicus through. There's a lot of different critical theories you could use to look and analyze Shakespeare's work through, and I wanted to do as many as possible, but that would just take up too much time. I do believe talking and learning about racism is extremely important, but I think the last thing anyone wants to hear is a white bitch talk about racism on the internet. I don't think we need more of that. I do have a small section later on in the video dedicated to Aaron, and he is mentioned in the conclusion, but the main reason I'm not covering him more extensively is due to time. I will say that I don't believe Aaron is the true villain in Titus Andronicus either. Let's get back on track. While no one really knows for sure, historians believe that Shakespeare wrote part of Titus Andronicus in 1589, in the era of Elizabethan England, named after Queen Elizabeth I. In English history, this is considered the Golden Age because of rapid economic growth in London. One of England's famous sea captains from this era, Sir Francis Drake, sailed to various locations considered new to the English. Indigenous people were already living there long before it was discovered. And this made sea voyages somewhat of a hot topic to English civilians. In the 1500s, London's population grew by 400%. This not only boosted the economy, but helped create art, literature, and the theater that London is now known for. However, by the second half of the 1500s, mortality rates in England were very high. 10% of London's population died each year due to disease, and 20% of the infant population in London also died yearly. The way I just smiled after I talked about infant mortality rates. Elizabethan London also had strict social laws. If you committed murder or theft and you were illiterate, you would get the death penalty. That's kind of messed up. It's not your fault you don't know how to read. If you had committed the same crime and you could read or write, your skin would be branded with a T for theft or an M for murder. Sumptuary laws made it illegal for citizens to wear colors or clothing material that was above their status. If you broke a sumptuary law, you would be fined or potentially arrested. In England, entertainment was typically very bloody and extremely violent. Many people went to watch public hangings, beheadings, or they'd go to a bear baiting show, which is where a pack of dogs attack a bear in a ring. That's messed up. But that's why Titus Andronicus is such a gruesome play, because theaters had to compete with different forms of entertainment. And this was the kind of content people wanted at the time. Things haven't really changed. There's a whole IMDb category for gore horror, so we act like we're a society that's above violence, but we consume media that's full of it. We can't help but be fascinated by it. Maybe watching bad things happen and knowing it isn't real helps us feel more in control, and maybe it helps desensitize us to violence when it is real. Anyways, in Elizabethan London, cheaper tickets only cost a penny, but you had to watch the play while standing, and these people were known as groundlings. More expensive tickets typically cost as much as a loaf of bread. The theater was for everyone to enjoy. You could watch a play regardless of whether you were rich or poor. Although Titus Andronicus takes place in Rome, certain aspects of Elizabethan society appear in Titus. More specifically, the way women are portrayed in Titus mirrors how women were viewed in 16th and 17th century England. Women are property of the men in power. This was very true in Lavinia's case. She is essentially owned by her father until she finds a husband, and then once her husband is killed and she is raped and mutilated, she's returned to her father, but now she is considered damaged goods or destroyed property. No one takes Lavinia's feelings into account. The play only focuses on how Lavinia's rape devastated her father, Titus. This is because she's not seen as a person, she's seen as property. Lavinia had little to no agency even before she was mutilated. She had no voice long before she had no tongue. I found a more comfortable position to seat. I'm not going to be centered, you're just going to have to deal with it. One reason why women were forced to rely on their fathers and husbands is because in 16th and 17th century England, women could not enter a financial contract or own their own property. This really pissed Virginia Woolf off. To Woolf, there could be no doubt that for some reason or other, our mothers had mismanaged their affairs very gravely. She doesn't say this to blame women for their financial disadvantages. She knew that, in the first place, to earn money was impossible for them, and in the second, had it been possible, the law denied them the right to possess what money they had earned. Woolf knew that even if women in the past had reliable forms of income, their earnings would be given to their husbands. Even when women were finally allowed to go to school and own property, they were still seen as lesser than their male counterparts. The damage to women's financial and intellectual freedom had already been done, and it would take a lot more than reversing a few laws to fix people's mindset towards women. She firmly believed that England is under the rule of a patriarchy, and that men mostly held all the power and the money and the influence. Despite this apparent patriarchy, some men still seem to have an irrational anger towards women, with Professor von X writing an essay called The Mental, Moral, and Physical Inferiority of the Female Sex. Woolf didn't understand this anger at first, and his writing made Woolf angry in return. She wrote that, with the exception of the fog, he seemed to control everything, and yet he was angry. She eventually concluded that the professor's anger was similar to the anger experienced by the rich when they fear the poor will steal their wealth. Possibly when the professor insisted a little too emphatically upon the inferiority of women, he was concerned not with their inferiority, but rather with his own superiority. This phenomenon has been made known as dominant group status threat by Isabel Wilkerson in her book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. It negatively affects the oppressor almost as much as it affects the oppressed. The oppressors become paranoid that they will lose their privilege as marginalized groups gain power. Privilege and power become a jewel to him of the rarest price. Very tiny part of the video where I talk about Aaron. It's Aaron time, Aaron the Moore time. Although he is still written to have humanity, the way he's characterized is almost cartoonishly evil, and I believe this is because of dominant group status threat. If the oppressed look like villains, the oppressors can feel justified in their oppression. Racism and sexism are interconnected. Most forms of oppression are, and while I still don't want to be a white bitch talking on the internet about racism, I think it would be a disservice to everyone if I didn't bring up Aaron a little bit, you know? He needs his time to shine too. Woolf never directly talks about dominant group status threat. Instead, she has a different explanation for why men in power are so angry with women. She believes that self-confidence is an invaluable quality, one that holds a lot of power. One of the quickest ways to gain self-confidence, according to Woolf, is by feeling that one has some innate superiority over other people. That's why even the nicest men were so easily triggered by feminist literature. To them, they were protesting against some infringement of his power to believe in himself. Woolf depicts women as being sort of a funhouse mirror to men for centuries, because they make men feel twice as big or powerful when they look at women. She feels that this has helped men in power establish various civilizations, and this shows that women are a necessity to men, but it's more essential to men that women feel small so they can feel superior. Woolf says that if she begins to tell the truth, the figure in the looking glass shrinks, his fitness for life is diminished. Woolf believes that men are addicted to the looking glass vision, the same way I am addicted to geek bars. They couldn't survive without it. When society is controlled by wealthy, powerful men, a lot of power comes from their wealth, but their power also stems from the oppression of women. English society was built on making women feel inferior so that men could feel superior. It's Tamora time. You've been waiting for the whole video for me to talk about Tamora, I bet. And now it's time. I'm gonna do it. Arguably, Tamora has a lot of power in Titus Andronicus. She's queen of the Goths, after all. When Saturninus decides to marry Tamora, I believe I'm saying that right? That's how we decided we're saying it in class, Saturninus? Well, anyways, he says, "If thou be pleased with my sudden choice, behold, I choose thee, Tamora, for my bride, and will create thee Empress of Rome. Speak, Queen of Goths, dost thou applaud my choice?" He's asking her if she wants to marry him. He doesn't have to ask her dad. Tamora isn't owned by a man in Rome, and her status as the Goth queen gives her slightly more agency than Lavinia had. According to Woolf, Professor Trevelyan wrote in his book, History of England, that marriage was not an affair of personal affection, but of family avarice, particularly in the chivalrous upper classes. Women had to agree to marriage, they didn't get to choose. If the daughter refused to marry the gentleman of her parents' choice, she was liable to be locked up, beaten, and flung about the room. This was definitely true for Lavinia, and I think this is partly true for Tamora, although her circumstances are different. It's true that she was a prisoner in Rome, so she likely felt that she couldn't say no to Saturninus, because in this instance, he does arguably have a lot more power than she does. Or maybe she was already scheming, and she just was waiting to put her plan into action. I think part of the reason why Saturninus wanted to marry Tamora in the first place was to get back at his brother and Titus for stealing Lavinia. But I also think since Saturninus was only recently crowned emperor, he may have wanted an empress with experience. Tamora may not have truly had a choice in the marriage, but at least Saturninus asked her how she felt about it, while Lavinia was supposed to marry whoever Titus wanted her to. I'd just like to say I don't agree with the notion that Tamora is a villain. Titus felt justified in killing her son because his sons died during the battle with the Goths, but I don't agree with Titus's justification. War is gruesome. Soldiers sign up for battle knowing they might die. So that leads me to believe Titus killed Tamora's son to assert dominance over her. He was using her as a mirror to make himself look twice as powerful. Winning the battle wasn't enough. Titus had to prove that Rome, ruled by a male emperor, was stronger than the Goths, which was governed by Tamora. I'm not saying that I agree with everything Tamora does. She is responsible for Lavinia's rape, and she is complicit in murder, but Titus is also a murderer, and he literally kills Lavinia because he was so ashamed of her after she was raped. He's not winning the Father of the Year award, is all I'm saying. Tamora may not have been a moral person either, but this is the only agency she was given in the story. Women are not a monolith. It's hard to be a good person when you're not viewed as an entire person in the first place. Being the protagonist just makes you the main character. It doesn't automatically give you good character, but somehow Titus's actions are always given justification. When Titus commits murder, it's portrayed as either revenge or a simple misunderstanding. For example, it's justified when he kills his own son because he's just trying to do what's good for Rome. His children may disagree with the murder, but he's still given an excuse and is later forgiven. Tamora's revenge is painted as villainy. Villainy? Did I say that right? I think it's right. Okay, keep going. And while her actions are not always morally virtuous, she's not the real villain in Titus Andronicus. She's the antagonist, sure, but I think the real villain is the way that society is structured. I understand that this is a very English major thing to say, but the way I see it, women are not recognized as complex human beings. They are either objectified or demonized, everyone is super racist to Aaron, and Rome is stuck in a never-ending cycle of violence because of this eye for an eye mentality. That's the real villain in Titus Andronicus. This is kind of Tamora propaganda, but you have to understand, I'm not justifying what she did to Lavinia. I think that was messed up. That was not like a very girl-supporting girl type thing. But I think she's a girl boss in other ways. For example, she's very manipulative throughout the play, and I don't really see this as a bad thing. She has Saturninus wrapped around her finger from the second they're wed up until his dying breath. In Act 1, she tells Saturninus, "My lord, be ruled by me, be one at last." She tells him to forgive Titus and Basinius and that she'll get revenge another way. She has the autonomy to scheme because she has power as empress. Saturninus helped her achieve such high status by choosing to marry her, but she is still the one wearing the pants in the relationship. Tamora is in control much more than Saturninus is, but she has to conceal this because she's a woman. She's almost been given a room of her own. Almost. As empress, she will never struggle financially, and when Saturninus allows her to take control of the situation in Act 1, she's able to demonstrate her intellectual capacity through her scheme, but she's portrayed as a villain because of it. While she still deserved to have more agency, this proves Virginia Woolf's claim to be correct. When women are allowed to have authority, they can be as intelligent as their male counterparts. Tamora schemed the same way Titus would scheme later on in the play, and both their schemes led to death and destruction. So, they're both equally as smart, or they're both equally as stupid. It all depends how you want to look at it. Professor Trevelyan concluded that neither Shakespeare's women nor those of authentic 17th century memoirs seemed wanting in personality and character. Woolf agrees with the sentiment, saying that Trevelyan is speaking no more than the truth. I'd argue that Tamora has a lot of character, but she's only able to express it once she's given agency. Lavinia is characterized as submissive and loving, the ideal woman for that time, while Tamora is wicked for having the audacity to take revenge against a powerful man. Women in Shakespeare are not usually given personality or character, but that doesn't mean they don't have either. They just rarely get the opportunity to express themselves because they do not have free will. Lots of people do not like Titus Andronicus. Some have said it is Shakespeare's worst play. And while this isn't my favorite play of Shakespeare's, I find it to be very thought-provoking because I don't consider the villains to be evil. Yes, Tamora and Aaron did terrible things, but so did Titus and the Romans, and they're kind of considered the heroes, you know? I think what's truly evil in Titus Andronicus is the racist and sexist foundations their society is built on. I think it's evil that Lavinia is considered property rather than a complex person, and when a traumatic event happens to her, her feelings aren't the center of the conversation. Tamora was given more autonomy than Lavinia, but her autonomy causes the main conflict, and she's kind of portrayed as like this monster, you know what I mean? It's like, dog, the real monster is Rome. Women in Shakespeare were not given freedom of choice because real women didn't have a choice in Elizabethan England. Titus Andronicus is a product of its time. Women didn't have rights while Shakespeare was writing Titus, so why would he give them rights in his play? It sucks, but I don't know. I just wish Lavinia had gotten a room of her own. Maybe then she wouldn't have gotten caught in the middle of Tamora's scheme. Maybe if Tamora had been respected at the beginning of the play, she wouldn't have felt the need to take revenge on Titus in the first place. Today, many women have a room of their own. We arguably have a lot more rights than we did in the 15th through 17th century. But sexism hasn't been miraculously solved. At least in the US, it's just kind of shifted to be more subtle. And with the current political climate going on in the US, I fear we may regress even further on our progress for women's rights. On International Women's Day in 2023, the UN reported that the Taliban banned education for girls beyond the 6th grade. They say the Taliban has shown an almost singular focus on imposing rules that leave most women and girls effectively trapped in their homes. This proves that, some women do kind of get a room of their own, but then it becomes a cage in a way, because they're still not intellectually or financially free. So I still agree with Woolf that women can have intellectual freedom once they've acquired that financial freedom, but I don't really think we ever will have financial freedom under capitalism. Yeah, this video was secretly communist the whole time, and you didn't know until right now. Corporations care more about their bottom line than they care about people, and honestly, I don't really need to cite anything for that, because that's something we've kind of all known for a long time. But regardless, we can't stop fighting until every woman gets a room of their own. We can't stop until we shatter the mirror inside ourselves that men, especially white men, use to make themselves feel superior. And that's the end of the video. You made it. Thank you for watching till the end. I really appreciate you. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side. Maybe. I might never post again. We'll see. He's eating Tamora's kids, bro. Bro, don't go.